It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio, Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday midweek edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your work day, and a big shout out to everybody also listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Our audience continues to grow. Tell your friends, your family, your neighbors, anybody that cares about agriculture, make sure they know about RealAg Radio. Okay, well, we got a big news day today. I think we got a decision by the Federal Reserve on interest rates in the U.S. We've, of course, got the big cabinet shuffle in Canada. And wow, I do not think that anybody had Lawrence Macaulay on their bingo card. Who's going to be the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food? That is right. Marie-Claude Bebeau is out. She is moved over to be the Minister of Revenue or National Revenue in Canada. I'm not exactly, I think that has to do with taxation. I'm not entirely sure, but we know this. What's old is new again. Similar to in the U.S., where we saw Secretary Vilsack come back to agriculture, and at the USDA, we have Lawrence Macaulay coming back. So this tends to be a bit of a trend that we're seeing, I guess. So I've got some thoughts on the cabinet shuffle and what this means, what it doesn't mean. Is there signals? Is there messages? I think there is, and I want your feedback on it. So we'll get to that in a little bit here. We're going to hear from Ted Seifried from Zaner Ag Hedge. Ted, we had to be very disciplined that we didn't commit an entire 15 minutes talking about Chicago Bears football as players are returning to camp. But we're going to talk about what's going on in the Black Sea. What's happening in the Black Sea, I describe it as a bit of a Black Sea blow up. And the impact, and we have so many unknowns related to what's happening in the Black Sea and some of those grain shipments for Russia and Ukraine. And then you tie that into the weather market that's happening in North America in certain parts. We've got a time right now very, very difficult to steer through from a marketing strategy standpoint. So we will break some of that down with Ted Seifried. And we're also going to talk to Kyle Larkin. Now, Kyle is the new executive director at the Grain Growers of Canada. And I was able to record an interview with him earlier this week. I'm going to play that for you here today. And Kyle has an extensive lobbyist background. He's new to agriculture, but very, very much known as a lobbying expert. I've seen some stories refer to him as. So we're going to meet Kyle. And then we've got some top ag news stories of the day. If you have any feedback on today's program, you can get a head start where your feedback is on Lawrence Macaulay being back as the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food. My email address is shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Threads. We're there. We are Real Agriculture on all those platforms. Or you can call the RealAg feedback line. This is a good day to call that feedback line, 855-776-6147. Let's take a break, and we'll get to Ted Seifried from Zaner Ag Hedge. We're going to talk markets. There's a lot happening. The markets are very volatile, and you need to better understand so you can develop that marketing strategy going forward. And we'll get to that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Introducing the Arion 600 Series tractor by Kloss, where versatility meets productivity head on, because you've got jobs to do. Mowing, tedding, raking, baling, loading, filling, tilling, cleaning, spreading, hauling, feeding. This is multi-purpose reimagined to do the work for you. It's more than just power. The Arion 600 tractor gets it done.
The Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com has everything you need to get your crop off to a great start and a strong finish. Whether you're growing chickpeas, faba beans, lentils, or peas, you'll get all the latest and best agronomic information at PulseSchool.com. A library of top-notch agronomy videos from industry experts available on demand at your fingertips. Visit the Pulse School, brought to you by BASF on RealAgriculture.com.
Infuse some energy into your next corporate event, customer meeting, or conference with RealAg Radio, Canada's national agriculture radio show. Create a unique experience at your next event with host Shaun Haney, broadcasting RealAg Radio live on SiriusXM, featuring exciting guests, captivating interviews, and the latest news from the agriculture community. Contact advertising at realagriculture.com or call 587-787-1795 to book your on location with RealAg Radio today.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. Imitator stabilizer products claim dual protection, but do they actually deliver? Defend your UAN from nitrogen loss with Tribune Nitrogen Stabilizer from Koch Agronomic Services, offering superior above and below ground protection. See how others stack up at defendyourn.ca. That's defendyourn.ca. Okay, let's talk markets. And we're joined right now by Ted Seifried from Zaner Ag Hedge, based in Chicago, Illinois. Ted, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Sean. How are you today, buddy?
Hey, man, I'm doing great. Okay, so Ted, I think a lot of the market attention here, and boy, we've had some green on the screen as of late. A lot of attention on what's going on in the Black Sea. What do we make of this? How do we take the information that we're hearing and then apply that to what we see happening in the markets?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, basically, we have to look at what the effects of the things that are happening over there mean for the markets overall and what they mean for Ukraine shipping and also what could potentially happen with Russian shipping, right? So obviously, we came out of the gates really strong to start the week based on the fact that Russia had a drone attack on the port of Danube, which when we were looking at that on Friday, a lot of us were saying, hey, it's very unlikely that they're going to attack that port because it's the furthest west you can get in Ukraine on the Black Sea from Russia. It's far. Secondly, it's right on the border of Romania, which is a NATO country. And Russia's got to be really careful about shooting anything real close to a NATO country, right? Because I would assume they don't want to escalate into that, right? But then they did Sunday night. So then, we really came out of the gate on Monday. Now, so the question is, what happens with that port of Danube? Because they've continued to be loading. Like the last 2 days, their ships still going out there. The real question is, are companies going to insure ships beyond what's already been sitting there waiting to get filled in, whatever's already at port? Are companies going to be sending ships in there after that? So that remains to be seen. Is Russia going to continue to attack it? Or was that a point that they wanted to prove that they could get to it, but then now they leave it alone? So far, they've left it alone. There's not been follow-up attacks since Sunday night. So those are the two big questions. And then the broader scale questions are, okay, what does Ukraine do? Because if Ukraine starts to attack Russian grain vessels in the Black Sea or attack Russian ports, there's been a lot of talk about them taking out bridges that supply the ports. So they might not have to actually attack the ports themselves, but attacking the infrastructure to get to the ports. If that starts to happen, this becomes a war about grain specifically. And then we have to say, okay, this is a really big deal because you have your number one wheat exporter in the world in Russia, and your number three wheat exporter in the world in Ukraine completely wiped out. That would be a big problem. So far, it hasn't escalated to that. I'm not sure if it will. I wonder if the drone strike on Danube is the fever pitch of this whole thing or not. It seems like the market is starting to think that might be the case because there hasn't been any follow-up yet. And we have settled down since the big strength that we saw on Monday. But I don't know. It's such a wild card, Sean. We've done a lot of things in the last 5 years, trading pandemics, trading trade wars, trading, bird flu, just really anything we can throw at the markets. We've really done that. this is just another one of those things that it's sort of unprecedented. We really don't know how to deal with this and what to do. What I will say is there's a tremendous amount of risk in either direction. So there's definitely very specific ways that I think you should be playing this with limited risk strategies and things like that. And these are more complex than just, your traditional buy or sell, I think in most cases. So yeah, it's a wild world we live in, a lot of risk all over the place. And the way you approach it is going to be, very important to what happens going forward. Also,
yeah, I was just going to say go ahead, Ted.
Big weather market in the meantime. So that kind of gets lost a little bit, and so, so much going on.
Yeah, we're dealing with a pretty significant drought in portions of the Western Canadian prairies. There's a lot of concern about what impact that's going to have for sure on canola production. But, in the case of, tying it to the Black Sea, what, spring wheat production is going to be in the Western Canadian prairies. I think we're comfortable, like we don't have all the right answers, but we're comfortable trading fundamentals. Mm-hmm. We're comfortable trading when, something happens and now it's like, hey, here's the impact. Trading military strategy is something kind of like it's all tied, but this is kind of new territory. And I think you're right that the risk level in either direction is escalated. I think I've had emails from listeners and viewers this week saying, hey, I told you this is not going well. The market is going higher. I'm not selling anything.
Yeah.
That's a strategy. And hey, you may be right.
That is a strategy. But then also, go back and look in what did we do, at the end of June where we just precipitously fell off, right? I mean, we had a $1.50 drop off the highs in corn, December corn in that time frame. We could easily do that again. Corn's the one that I'm a bit more worried about than wheat because the thing about corn, the thing about corn and how it relates to the Ukraine is, their marketing season is the same as ours, right? So they're at the very tail end of their old crop marketing year, meaning their export season has pretty much run its course. There wasn't going to be a massive amount of corn scheduled for export between now and new crop harvest. So the grain corridor or lack thereof, that really impacts corn further down the line. More so, again, once that new crop is harvested and brought to ports and in position mid-October into November, that's when it will really hurt the corn market. And there could very well be another deal in place. You really wonder, personally, look, I'm not condoning anything Russia's doing. And I really think this whole thing is just a complete ridiculous thing. But what they're asking for basically, Shaun, is to allow for their exports of fertilizer. And it occurs to me that, go back to the end of the last calendar year, October of last year, we had fert prices darn near close to record highs. I don't know if it'd be terrible for the market as a whole to allow some of that Russian fertilizer to come out. Now, I get it. We don't want Russia having any more money than they have already. Sanctions are in place for a reason and so on and so forth. But it doesn't seem to me like a big ask from Russia in order to keep that grain corridor open. And that's just me looking at this from an economic standpoint, not a taking sides or again, war strategy standpoint, anything like that. I just think that isn't a whole lot of concession to make to have that grain corridor continue to be open. So I don't know, maybe something like that happens between now and when the new crop corn export season starts in the Ukraine. I get the feeling China's going to want to push for something like that because China is the main beneficiary of the Ukrainian exports. To date, they've taken about 8 million metric tons of corn exports from the Ukraine. That's by far the most of any other country. And I think adds up to being more than all the other countries combined that have received Ukrainian corn. So China has a big interest in this. And China is really Russia's only major international friend, outside of the region. I would think that China might have a lot to say in it. So will Turkey. Again, things may get resolved at some point. You have to think, Russia was in this grain deal at one point. They're out, but you could get them back in. Even the rhetoric that you hear coming from the Kremlin is that we would go back into the grain deal if some of our asks are met. And again, I think if we allow them to export fert, I don't know if that'd be the worst thing in the world. So, we'll see.
Ted, you're not alone in that, though. And this really touches on, what's been happening in Canada, as Canada has really led this charge of saying no way to Russian fertilizer, putting tariffs at a incredibly untimely, right at the beginning of the conflict on that Russian fertilizer that Eastern Canada is heavily, heavily reliant on. That money, that tariff money that was collected never really returned to farmers. So, but to your point, though, there just is no political appetite coming from the Canadian federal government to switch that, because it will be taken so much as like, oh, you're supporting, even you put out the preface before saying, listen, I'm not condoning. And so that's the issue, that politicians that have been so much on this narrative would have to backtrack and then try to reposition their strategy. And they've kind of made the bed now, and food prices, especially if we see this, really take off, it's going to have an impact. That may be the outcome we need for them to change their position on this, but that's going to take time.
Yeah, and the biggest problem here, Shaun, is that the guys that are making these decisions, they don't really understand agriculture and markets and, like you said, high costs of food and things like that, and what causes that. They don't get it. So policy is being made by people that sit in offices. It's not being made by people that understand the markets that we are living in and how that impacts everybody's daily life. So yeah, it's unfortunate. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if there were some sort of resolution coming by the time we get to that new crop corn harvest. Because like I said, I think China is going to try to broker a deal between Russia, Ukraine, and possibly the West as well.
Okay. So let's hit on this weather. You mentioned the weather market. Let's hit on it. I mentioned the challenges in Western Canada. It's really, there all were parts, especially even in northern Saskatchewan, looking, pretty decent in the spring. We have not had a lot of rain since. That production number continues to dip. The Midwest has had some of its challenges. Let's break down this weather market and how we should be interpreting it. And that's an added complexity on top of all the other things that are happening overseas.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is one of the more complex weather markets that we've seen in a few years. Last year was interesting with the late season dryness. But what was the hot and dry area? Look, this part of the Midwest didn't rain from April into the second or almost third week of June, right? And so we have a tremendous amount of dryness. Soil deficit is we're not even coming back from it as quickly as we thought we would. The drought monitor is still concerning, although it has improved slightly. Crop conditions have improved slightly. We need a lot more follow-up rain, especially for corn right now in, pollination. And for the most part, we're not really getting it, although I say that as it is absolutely storming outside my house right now. Temperatures are rather warm. So there is concern about corn. And in the meantime, that hot and dry area has shifted to you guys. Because like you said, you started out nice during the spring, but now that has really changed. It's going to be really interesting to see how we finish this out. I'm very curious to see how this corn crop makes it through. I think we've had some fairly timely rains to keep us from having the absolute disaster of a corn crop, like a 2012 type thing. There are people that will argue with me about that. I'm going to go out on crop tour and find out in about 3 weeks. But it's a huge question mark. We always have questions about the crop, but I think this year, more than any that I can really remember in recent history. And then you have soybeans, that's the month of August, right? And so we look out into August, we see NOAA forecasts that are really very favorable for soybeans, but also we've seen a lot of favorable longer term forecasts that haven't come to fruition. So I don't think we really know what to do. What I will say is that extra 2.2 million acres of corn does give us a big cushion. We don't necessarily have to have a 177.5 national average yield. In fact, I don't even think we need to have a 172 in order to keep above a 2 billion bushel carryover. But for soybeans, losing 4 million acres below intentions, man, the margins are razor thin in soybeans. You really don't have a lot of downside play for that national average soybean yield, because if you do, you really have to cut out exports. And to cut out exports, well, how does that happen? That has to happen probably from price rationing. We've rallied $3 from the late May lows in soybeans. Maybe that's enough to price ration some exports. We're not seeing a huge amount of new crop exports come on the books quite yet. But I mean, the USDA is already looking for a lower export number from last year, or actually current marketing year. I don't know. Again, if you drop that soybean yield down to 50 or 49.5, man, we're going to be looking at potentially one of the tightest balance sheets that we've seen in the last few years. And that's, during this period of tight balance sheets and high prices. Yeah. And this could be the tightest one for soybeans. So that is a powder keg. It's very interesting. We can't really make any assumptions for the moment because, again, we need to see what happens with weather in August. But I also don't think soybeans are in the position to really break very hard at the moment because we can't go out and entice new demand right now. We don't know if we have it. So I think soybeans have a fairly strong base underneath them between now and the end of August until we really do have a much better idea of what that yield's going to look like.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing from you correct me if I'm wrong, but soybeans have a very high floor.
For the moment, yes. Okay. Yes. For the next few weeks, at least until we need to know what the weather is in August. That's always the case for soybeans. But like I said, there's really no room for error this year.
Yeah, that 4 million acres being shaved off, that really was like a thrown a grenade into a crowd. Like it just really changed the dynamic. Wow, yeah. For sure.
Well, so two things there, right? I thought we would see more corn acres than what we had in intentions. I didn't think it would be that big of a shift. I didn't think we'd lose that many soybean acres. But think about it. Generally speaking, when we get off to a fast start of planting, we end up planting a little bit more corn, a little bit less soybeans. And that was certainly the case this year. But then also, we talked about FERT prices, input costs. The guys who booked it in the fall paid really very high prices. But by the time we were getting ready to go in the spring, those in a lot of areas had dropped in half or maybe even a third of what we were paying back in October. So then you're sitting there thinking, well, I've got the window to continue planting corn. And if I book these inputs at much less prices, even if it's only another third of my overall production, I'm averaging down my average cost for the farm as a whole. And that makes my balance sheet look better. And I think that had a lot to do with why there was that shift towards corn and out of soybeans, I guess, to some extent.
Hey, Ted, really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much. All the best to you. And let's go Bears because training camp's open and Jay Fields is going to have a great year, right, man?
Let's go Bears. He's going to have a fantastic year. We just got to block a little bit for him. He's super mobile. Get that arm going and get those legs going. And, man, we might have the most dynamic offense out there this year.
Dude can run, but he's running for his life if you look at last year. Hey, Ted, thanks a lot. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, buddy. You too.
Me and my two boys are so excited about Bears football this year. Justin Fields is going to shock people. He's going to be we're excited. And I got a few friends they're Lions fans. There's a lot stacking up here. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to football starting. Not, I think, 6 weeks from the NFL season, 5 weeks from college. So, that's when football takes over our lives in our house. So, looking forward to it. Let's take a break. When we come back, we've got to talk about today's cabinet shuffle. Did Prime Minister Trudeau make the right moves, the wrong moves, and what was he thinking? We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
Does your N stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
As you head out into the field this season, the Corn School's got you covered. Everything from tillage discussions, weed control info, field trial results, yield strategies, and more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Pride Seeds, BASF, and Syngenta Canada.
This segment of RealAg Radio is brought to you by Granubor from US Borax. Ask for it by name. Go to borax.com. That is Granubor from US Borax. Well, I mentioned at the top of the show, we got a cabinet shuffle in Canada, and significant. It lived up to the billing, I would say. And if you're looking for a bit of a flashback, that's right. Lawrence McCauley, MP for Cardigan PEI, is back as the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. No, I tweeted earlier today, I don't think anybody had it on their bingo card. There was other suggestions out there, but not Lawrence. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau shuffled his cabinet ahead of the fall session of Parliament, spurred by the news of 7 ministers not seeking re-election next round, whenever that election may occur. Yeah, there was a big deal made up with the fact that the Prime Minister really held people to, you need to tell us now if you're going to be running in the next election. So does this mean that McCauley is going to be running in the next election? Man, he's been in the House of Commons since November 21st of 1988. So he's longest serving MP for sure. He's coming out of the as Minister of Veterans Affairs and Associate Minister of National Defense, which makes sense because of PEI and where he is around Summerside. He was first named as Ag Minister in November of 2015 in Trudeau's very first cabinet. I've interviewed Mr. McCauley several times, as have some of my colleagues as well. I got some thought. We'll come back to that in a second. But also of note for Canadian agriculture, Mark Holland has been named the new Minister of Health, and Pablo Rodriguez is in as Minister of Transport. Mary Ng remains Trade Minister and has had the small business portion of her portfolio handed off to former Ag Committee member Rechi Valdez. So I wrote a column yesterday about, and you've heard me rant many times on this show about it, that it is time to split up Minister Ng's portfolio. You can't be the Minister of International Trade, Minister of Economic Development, Minister of Small Business. It's insanity. None of that is getting attention. And it's nothing to say bad about Minister Ng. Just how do you get all that done? You're having to deal with the small business taxation issues of local Subway franchise owners, and then also having to talk about non-tariff trade barriers with China or dairy TRQs with the U.S. You're going in 1,000 different directions. And many of those stakeholders don't overlap at all. So glad to see that change was made. Now, back to agriculture. So the question is, this is going to get a pretty interesting reaction from the industry. And I want your feedback at Haney at RealAgriculture.com. I wrote a column as well yesterday that I texted many people yesterday. And I would say I didn't have a single Ottawa insider say that they thought that Mr. Rabeau was out. She's going to move over to national revenue. There was a strong feeling that she would be back in the spot as the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Now, there was one source that told us, listen, she fulfilled the commitments of her mandate letter, time for, a new list and a new person. There's things on the mandate later that were not completed. We got the Grain Act review, seed regulatory modernization not done, the issue with horse slaughter not finished. So I'm not sure that the whole list was completed. I had another person text me and say, maybe this is a peace offering to the industry that, at kind of Lawrence's stage and how he sort of goes about things. We're not going to have any big shakeups at all, and this would be some calm waters for the industry. Other people have said to me that they're very, very discouraged, that, agriculture has been a ministry that is not something that gets a lot of attention. It's had a hard time for a while in this Liberal government really gaining any sort of attention and traction. It was a significant event last February when Prime Minister Trudeau showed up at that CFA meeting. and sang the praises of agriculture and talked about, the good work that Minister Bobo was doing. I was in the same camp. I thought she would, it's interesting. My first thought was she's getting moved. And I got convinced otherwise because I couldn't find another single person that thought she was. And so I was like, okay, well, I can argue that narrative too. And I should have stuck with maybe my original thought. What I thought is we may see more of a Cody Blois from King's Haunts in Nova Scotia. He is, he's the chair of the House Ag Committee. We may see Frank Drouin, who is an Ontario MP that is parliamentary secretary to agriculture. Neither of those got posts in this cabinet. So, up and comers that still looking for a home. This is going to be something that I think the industry is going to challenge in terms of there's a lot of work to be done, having trouble gaining traction. There's a lot of battles here. And based on past experiences, this is going to be sort of just, we're just going to stay right here where we are. So there's going to be some challenges here for the industry to kind of get used to going back to how it was previous to Bobo. And Mr. McCauley's going to have to sort of, get re-energized in terms of what his vision is for the department as well. He's got some big things: Grain Act review, seed regulatory modernization, just to name a couple. And there definitely is more. And there also is, the impact that ECCC and the environment portfolio and the environment file, the how they are moving more and more into the agriculture area, and it's impacting farmers and ranchers. And so that's going to be a bit of a battle, and something that the industry is going to need somebody to stick up for them in cabinet. The time will tell if that's what they're going to get out of Mr. McCauley, or is this more of an ambassador post? And that may be a little bit of the message here. This is becoming more of very much a liaison of government to farmers and ranchers, not necessarily a representative of the industry. That's the situation. That's the reality as far as things go here right now. And this is, you can either, retire and get an ambassador post in the UK like Ralph Goodale did. It was a sweet job. I want his job. He's not the ambassador, but I can't remember the exact title, but he gets to hang out in London in a very nice place and go to a bunch of fancy dinners and drink the odd pint of Guinness. Or you could be the ag minister. And it's really unfortunate. I'm going to write about this for RealAgriculture.com and kind of put some thoughts together as the week progresses. But I want your thoughts. Send me an email, shaney@RealAgriculture.com. What are your thoughts? Do you like this reappointment? Like I said, in the U.S., we got Secretary Vilsack. He came back to the USDA. Some are going to say that, well, look at Mr. McCauley's been an MP since 1988. He's still younger than both the likely Republican and Democrat candidates in the next U.S. election. So, don't hold that against him. But is this the best thing for agriculture right now? What's old is new again. I want to get your feedback, and we'll read some of it on the air as we get to the Real Ag Issues panel. And definitely the Farmer Rapid Fire is going to be talking about this tomorrow on the show. Send me an email, like I said. Hey, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get to the top ag news stories of the day right after this.
Advanced canola trait technology is here. And it's soon to be the talk of the town. Optimum Glide delivers excellent yield potential and agronomic trait performance. Improved crop safety. Enhanced weed control. And a wider window of application. You're going to want to see this. Learn more at OptimumGlide.ca.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
would love your feedback on this cabinet shuffle that has happened today and what your thoughts are on Lawrence MacAulay from PEI being back as the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food. I've given you my thoughts. What are yours? We're going to have more of this as the week progresses. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Okay, I want to tell you about the Canadian Beef Industry Conference. It's happening at the BMO Centre on Stampede Park in Calgary, Alberta from August 15th through the 17th. Join us. That's right. And RealAg Radio is going to be there. We're doing a live recording of the show with on the agenda, like from the stage. It's going to be so much fun. I love these kinds of events. I love chatting about the beef industry, and it's going to be a really great time. So make sure you are there, because in Canada, we are beef. The Canadian Beef Industry Conference you can find out more by going to CanadianBeefIndustryConference.com for full details and to register today. Okay, let's get into my discussion with Kyle Larkin. He is the new Executive Director of the Grain Growers of Canada. Kyle, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sean. Happy to be here.
Okay, so Kyle, now correct me if I'm wrong, but new to the agriculture industry, correct?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I'm not new to lobbying or politics, so that's what I bring to the table.
Exactly. So I wanted you to give us your background. Tell us about Kyle Larkin and some of the stuff that you've done that led you to being Executive Director at the Grain Growers of Canada.
Absolutely. Great question. So I come from a background in politics and lobbying. I've been involved in that side of things for well over 10 years now. Really got my start in politics, actually on the lobbying side of things. So I worked for a small lobbying firm based here in Ottawa, and soon after that, I worked for two members of Parliament in their offices here in Ottawa. The last one was actually the Parliamentary Secretary of the Prime Minister, and then after that, I spent and this was the most recent employment. I spent the last 7.5 years at Impact Public Affairs, which is a firm that really specializes in association advocacy. So the vast majority of clients there are national or provincial associations. So really got a taste of a bunch of different sectors across Canada, a little bit on the agricultural side as well. But really that's where I built my appreciation for associations. And that's kind of what led me to the Grain Growers of Canada now, which I'm really looking forward to working with.
When you think about lobbying for a company or an industry and their interests versus an association, and Grain Growers of Canada is a grouping of farm groups, right? Are there differences?
There's absolutely differences, and both of them have their strengths and both of them have their weaknesses. That's for sure. I think on the corporate side of things, it's a little harder on the lobbying side of things because you're really going in there for yourself. I think on the association side of things, it's a lot more for the collective good. With the Grain Growers of Canada, for example, going in there, being able to lobby on behalf of 65,000 farmers, you're not just lobbying for one company or one farmer. You're really lobbying for all farmers across Canada, trying to make the system better so that they can do better and really contribute more to Canada's economy. So I think that's one of the main differences. The other main difference, obviously, is having members across Canada. You can tap into that network. Those folks are available to meet with their local members of Parliament or do their own advocacy. I know we have them to Ottawa a few times a year as well. Having farmers here in Ottawa is also a big benefit. I mean, members of Parliament, ministers, staffers, etc., they're used to hearing from folks like me, professional lobbyists. But the folks that they really appreciate meeting are folks who are on the ground, actually working in different sectors. So when we can have farmers here in Ottawa, I think that adds a little more of a personal touch for members of Parliament to be able to tap into.
Now, previously, as you mentioned at Impact, you were lobbying on behalf of numerous associations focused in different industries. Now you're going to be focused in agriculture. Now, why the move? What interests you about being so focused in one industry at this point?
Great question. And one of the positives, I think, getting out of Impact there is having worked with so many different sectors, I was really able to learn and hone in on what I was the most passionate about. And what I tended to get back to was really sectors where Canadians were getting their hands dirty, really on the ground, tangible evidence of work. So, I worked a bit at the Canadian Construction Association as well. They represent, 20,000 construction companies across Canada. And they represent real workers on the ground who are building stuff and making things happen. And I think farmers are really in that same area. They, day in and day out, they wake up, they get their hands dirty, and they make real economic benefits across Canada. And I think it doesn't hurt that it's really an essential sector to not only Canada's economy, but really the global economy. So that's something that really interested me. But I just go back to always having had an appreciation for hard working Canadians. I could have gone to some other spaces, but this grain growers opportunity came along, and I thought it was a great opportunity to be able to work with some folks across Canada who are making things happen and really working hard. And sometimes they just need a break or support from the federal government. So I'm happy to be their voice here, and really looking forward to engaging with members of Parliament and others.
Now, Kyle, one of the brand challenges maybe of the Grain Growers of Canada would be trying to fight this idea, the perceptions of whether it's national or not. Now, Grain Farmers of Ontario was in the org, now outside of the org. Do you see yourself trying to bring GFO back into the fold of Grain Growers of Canada?
Look, I'm born and raised in Ontario. I'm an Ontario boy, so it personally hurts that we don't have the Grain Farmers of Ontario inside the tent right now, but that doesn't mean that we can't work with them right now on a variety of different policy issues, and that also doesn't mean that we can't be lobbying at the federal level and representing Ontario one way or another. It is a federated association. We obviously have members across Canada that we need to ensure are well represented here in Ottawa. There's obviously many farmers in the prairies. But that doesn't mean that there's not important farmers in Atlantic Canada, in Quebec, in British Columbia. Everyone needs to be at the table. And that's really my goal, I think, with Grain Growers of Canada, is bringing everybody around the table, trying to build consensus and engaging the federal government as one body. So we're going to go ahead and do that, but also work with Grain Farmers of Ontario as well. And, always hoping that we'll get them back at a time of their choosing and when they're good to come back.
So what do you see as some of the biggest, and I know you're just kind of getting your feet wet in the role and probably trying to find the pencil sharpener and where's the, why is the coffee maker so far down the hall? Those kinds of things. And I get that. But what are some of the high level things that you are really going to be a focus for yourself heading into the fall here?
Absolutely. I think there's really three priorities going into the fall. And I know you've spoken to a lot of folks on your show about C-234, which obviously got held up a bit in the Senate there at the end of the last session. And our big hope is to get that done within the first couple of weeks of Parliament returning. So that's definitely a focus. We want to make sure that the government's supporting farmers, giving them a break on a carbon pricing scheme that is unfairly penalizing them for equipment that there is no alternative for. So that's definitely a big priority. The second priority is around interswitching. Obviously happy to see the Budget Implementation Act passed in June and having extended rail interswitching introduced from 30 kilometers to 160 kilometers. The challenge there obviously is it's an 18-month pilot project. We want that obviously made permanent. And even if the radius of interswitching can be increased over and above 160 kilometers, because I understand there's farmers in northern Saskatchewan and farmers in northern Alberta that still can't access that extended interswitching. We want that as well. So really going in the fall, we want to be lobbying for a permanency to the extended interswitching program. Before we know it, those 18 months are going to be done, and we're going to be back to 30 kilometers. So we want to make sure that it's not just 18 months, that it's really something that we have for the long run. And then the final one is you've likely heard that the Grain Growers of Canada have been working on a Road to 2050 report. The report's really on how farmers can contribute to the government's objectives on net zero. So in the fall, really looking to launch that publicly and start some lobbying on that as well. The main thing that we're focused on there is really a balanced approach for farmers that's farmer driven. And that really avoids generalization or just one blanket policy. We want the government really to be putting, environmental programs out there that farmers can tap into, but tap into at a time of their choosing and tap into what works for them. A farmer that is farming pulses, let's say, in Quebec is different than a farmer that's farming canola or barley in Alberta. And so everybody's got different climates. Everybody's got different situations that they're dealing in right now. So we want to make sure those programs are tailored for farmers and that they can access them at a time of their choosing, because farmers really are already stewards of the land. They're already environmentally conscious. I mean, you look at the greenhouse gas emissions reductions over the past 20 years from basic practices that farmers have adopted. It's quite amazing, and it's an amazing story to tell. So that's the story we're really going to be looking to tell in the fall. But to go back, those are the three priorities that right now we want to be looking at going into the next parliamentary session. Yeah,
Tyler Bjornson was the interim executive director while they filled this spot that you have taken over. And prior was Aaron Garelick, who's now moved over to the Canada Grains Council. Did either of them leave a note for you, some thoughts, some recommendations, tell you what you're in for here?
Well, I'm really lucky to have both of them in my corner. I can tell you that much. So Aaron is my neighbor here at Grains HQ in downtown Ottawa. And Tyler is still around behind the scenes helping out, so he's never far from the industry. I owe them both deep gratitude and a big thank you for how easy and nice the transition has been. Aaron's always available, and Tyler's still helping me out figure out, like you said, where to find the pencil sharpener. So I'm happy to have their support.
Okay, and final question: you did mention that you've done some work around the PMO's office. Now, being in those circles a little bit. How does that help you and play to an advantage for the sector based on some of your experiences being around that part of Parliament Hill?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the things I bring to the table is certainly my connections on Parliament Hill. And it's not just with one party or another. I mean, having been in the lobbying sector for, nearly a decade now, I have friends in every single party. Including the Bloc Québécois. I am bilingual. I do speak French, and they maybe weren't a force to deal with coming out of the 2015 election. But I can tell you nowadays, with 32 seats in the House of Commons, they're a party you have to be engaging with, amongst the others, amongst the NDP, the Conservatives, and the Liberals. They're all important in the House, and I'm fortunate enough to have been able to build connections with all of them because of all the different policies and issues that I've dealt with over the past 7.5 years on the consulting lobbying side of things. That's really allowed me not only to build connections with different parties, but also different ministers' offices and different departments. So, I know agriculture, the Minister of Agriculture's office obviously is super crucial for grain growers of Canada, but there's also a lot of other offices that are important, be it transportation, environment and climate change, foreign affairs, international trade, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of offices that we have to get into. And so I'm really looking forward to tap into those contacts that I've built over the past decade and put them to good use for the grain growers of Canada.
We've been talking to Kyle Larkin. He is the new Executive Director of the Grain Growers of Canada. Kyle, thanks a lot for joining us. And I know this will not be the last time we chat. Look forward to the next opportunity.
Thanks, Shaun. Really appreciate it.
When we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to get to the top ag news stories of the day. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
Encourage you to check out RealAg Shops. Episode 1 was posted recently on our YouTube channel at RealAgriculture.com. It is brought to you by Princess Auto. It's a really cool tour through different farmer shops, and I think you're really going to enjoy it, so check it out. And we're also looking for new episodes, and so if you are interested in showing off your shop, big, small, new, old, we want to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Let's get to the top ag news stories of the day. We've already covered this significant cabinet shuffle, so we'll skip on to the next thing. And I guess the biggest news out there in North America would be the fact the Federal Reserve resumed lifting interest rates today with a 0.25 percentage point increase that will bring the rate in the U.S. to a new 22-year high. The unanimous decision to raise the benchmark federal funds rate to a range between 5.25% and 5.5% ended a brief pause in the rate increase last month as officials debate whether they have done enough to combat inflation. It marks the 11th increase since March of 2022 when they lifted rates from near zero. We'll see what the Fed does next. In maybe, I don't know what's going on today. Today is is a crazy day. If you thought Lawrence Macaulay returning to be the ag minister was a big surprise, well, let me tell you about this. There's a press release that went out, a joint press release between the Western wheat growers and the NFU. I'm not sure we could agree on the day of the week, but they agree on the fact that they're calling on Mr. Macaulay to halt the Canadian Grain Commission move to impose export grading standards on country elevator deliveries. The NFU and the WGA disagree on many policy matters, but are united in their opposition to the decision to harmonize of primary and export standards for wheat. In spite of common opposition from virtually all the farmers on the CGC's Western Standards Committee, the CGC has decided to harmonize primary and export standards for wheat as of August 1st, 2023. The Western Standards Committee includes members of both the NFU and the WGA. We've got a story up at RealAgriculture.com about this. There's something I never thought I would ever see. Good on the groups. They found common ground. It's a pretty narrow sliver, but they found common ground. I think that's a huge positive indeed. Interesting story in Pro Farmer today regarding the restrictions on purchases of U.S. farmland. This is a big topic in the U.S., and it mainly, I guess, has to do with China and other countries, Iran and Russia and other adversarial nations. Although Canada is one of the largest owners. Canadians are one of the largest owners of U.S. farmland. The Senate on Tuesday easily cleared an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act, barring investors from China, Russia, Iran, North Korea from purchasing U.S. farmland. The measure, approved with a 91-7 majority, also necessitates a review from the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. on overseas land purchases exceeding $5 million or 320 acres from investors from any other country. So somebody from any other country is going to be buying more than 320 acres. There has to be review of it. The vote revealed bipartisan support with only 7 senators, 6 Democrats, and 1 Republican opposing it. The proposed measure which further integrates the USDA into the CFIUS as an ex officio member. There's also provision for presidential discretion. Investors can be exempt from these regulations if deemed crucial to the U.S. national security interests. The bill won't affect U.S. citizens or aliens lawfully admitted for permanent residence. The defense bill, including the amendment, must be reconciled with the House equivalent. So we'll see where this goes indeed. Getting back to the big cabinet shuffle that happened, encourage you to provide your feedback. What are your thoughts on the job that Mr. Bibeau did as the Minister of Agriculture and Agri-Food? And what's your thoughts on Lawrence Macaulay returning to that seat? Is it a good thing? Is change good? Is change bad? What do you expect out of Mr. Macaulay? And what would you like to see out of this version of the Ag Minister? You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com, where no doubt can ask our farmers on the Farmer Rapid Fire tomorrow about this. You can also call the Real Ag feedback line. You can dial the number and you press the number 3 and you leave me a message, 855-776-6147. Thanks everybody for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio, and we will chat again tomorrow. Cheers everybody.